we were lamenting the fact that so often we run into people, we talk to spouses who are leaning into the marriage and their spouse is leaning out, and their leaning out spouse is likely past the point of no return. We can't always tell that, right? We don't always know if they're past the point of no return. There's likely a chance. We always try to go for that chance if we're trying to magnetize a leaning out spouse back into the marriage. But so often we talk to spouses, and I will say, and I don't mean for this to sound judgmental in any way, and this is purely anecdotal, we talk to more men, more husbands who are leaning in, whose wives are leaning out, and they feel blindsided. They feel blindsided and they're in despair. And what's frustrating for us is that because when we find out what's really going on and we get a better sense of like what the warning signs were, what was happening, we're exploring the dynamics, there are signs. So we wanted to have a conversation about what these signs are. This is like a public service announcement of things that we don't want you to ignore in your marriage so that you don't get to the point where it's too late. It breaks my heart personally, and I know we've had conversations about this where it's like, God, I wish they would have come to us sooner. We could have maybe helped, right?
Exactly.
And if they're past the point of no return, what can we do?
Exactly. This happens all the time. And of course, sometimes it is women who find themselves in this position, what we're going to be discussing today. But quite often it is the guys, unfortunately. And that's roughly about half of our clientele.
This is not to say that there's like something wrong with men. It's just socialization. We're not faulting. We're not saying this is a character defect that's related to gender. We're talking about the way that there's been a socialization that enforces women being more relational, women receiving influence more, defining their identity and their value and their worth is much more relational. That is just, it's allowed, and it's allowed to express emotions more for women than it is for men. Men are not allowed that. And so it's not a dig. It's like, it's a real disservice, the history. And I know this is changing now. So we're talking about most of our clients, what would you say are like 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s? Like we're talking about a certain like older generation. The younger generation, I think this is not the case necessarily as much as it used to be. But when I think about my generation, my parents' generation, a lot of the guys are just not allowed to have their feelings. They're not allowed to express their feelings. And they have not formed their worthiness or their identity or their sense of self based on relationships. It's based on other things. And so a lot of times they come to us and they're like, we have everything. We have a great family. We've got great kids, great career. I've got it all. And now they want to leave. And it's devastating because it's like, you have so much at stake and there's so much that you've been working for all this time, right? And a lot of the guys, they've been working their butts off for their families, for their spouses. And in their mind, it's like, what is the point of doing all of that if we get to the point where now my spouse wants to leave, when now we can finally actually enjoy the fruits of our labor a little bit more? So we want to share what we're noticing so that you can be aware, but hopefully not at the point where it's too late. And with the caveat that sometimes we think it's too late, but it's really not. So there's always hope.
Yes, I just want to second that. Men, especially in those older generations, have been taught to suppress their emotions and to bypass them and to not show them. And so the attunement really isn't there. And it's through no fault of their own. It's really unfair that men have been pressured to not be vulnerable, to not attend to emotional distress within themselves, because that contributes to the dynamic whereby they are not able to attune to the emotional distress in their partner as well. And that is one of the biggest factors leading to what we see often, which is a wife calling for a separation or a divorce because of not feeling heard, seen, or understood for many years, essentially feeling ignored in the marriage. Her cries for help are going, if not unnoticed, at least unattended, especially if they feel like they are doing everything right. And in a lot of ways, they're right about what they're doing right. They're providing, they're protecting. Yeah. They show up to the program and they say, I thought we were okay. I thought I was doing the right thing. My wife and kids have anything and everything they could want or need, but she's leaving me. And the reason is the emotional connection has been gone. And so that's what we're talking about today. This is a big PSA to all of you guys out there who, you might have a feeling that something's wrong, or that it's not as good as it could be, but you're kind of telling yourself, it's okay. We're okay. I got it. I'll fix it when. I'll deal with it later. It's not that bad. Mm-hmm. When you think that, it's usually twice as bad as you are allowing yourself to believe. That's her reality, which is much different from yours. And we don't want you to be blindsided. We don't want you to be one of those people that calls in and says, oh my God, is it too late?
Exactly. So what we're going to do today is we're going to share 6 things. We might have more, but right now we have 6 things that I want to make sure that you are noticing that are the sign that you're getting to the point of no return, that you definitely do not want to ignore. And the first thing that I think indicates danger is that your spouse has been complaining for years that they feel emotionally disconnected from you. This is the dominant narrative of the relationship. There's been times maybe where you feel like, I don't even know what to do. I feel like we are connected. I feel like we're connected. I don't know why she's not feeling connected. And you might feel like, why does this keep coming back up again, right? The hurts keep coming back up and you're like, that happened 10 years ago. Why are you bringing up things that we've already talked about? Because there's still some hurt around that. I think that it's like bids for connection that are not met. And John Gottman talks about this a lot, right? These small bids for connection that are ignored, they create more pain than you realize. And the reason why it gets to the point of no return is because people, when they feel pain for so long and they feel not seen and heard, or they feel that disconnect for so long from their primary attachment, they eventually get to a point where they have to harden their heart or wall off or block off the option of even trying again because they can't bear the disappointment. So you don't want to look at this as like, you're doing it wrong and it's an inadequacy. It's more like you just have to look at it through the lenses of this is causing hurt. It's not intentional, but the pain is real. And so if you can look at it as this is about having empathy for the pain that this is causing, this isn't about me having to prove that I'm not inadequate, right? It's about understanding the emotional needs of your spouse and kind of getting out of the way to realize that it's about them. And if you notice that you're living parallel lives and you notice that they're not complaining anymore and they're doing their own thing because they've given up, they've stopped talking about connection. They've stopped asking to do things. They stopped talking about affection and why there's not more affection. Like once that stops and they're just doing their own thing and you're just doing your own thing, you might think that things are better because they're not complaining anymore. It seems like a good sign, but it's not. It's actually a sign that you're entering more into danger territory because they've sort of given up. This is why a lot of times, Maliha, don't you feel like this is true for you, that when they say that they feel blindsided and we talk to them in more detail, we realize, well, they were saying these things, but they confused the cessation of complaining with things are good, right? They assume that now that she's no longer bringing it up, the coast is clear and it's like nothing could be farther from the truth.
Exactly. She's not bringing it up anymore because of years of talking about it, months, years of talking about it and not getting the change. And so she realized at that point, okay, it's not landing. And that's when a wife, a spouse reaches that place of hopelessness of, okay, I've done all that I know how to do in terms of naming what's going wrong, naming what I need. Nothing is working. Nothing's landing. Nothing's getting through. I'm exhausted. I'll just stop and see if I can live with it. But most people can't live in that place for very long. Everyone has a threshold.
And the other thing I think we see a lot is an ongoing lack of accountability. When one or both partners are consistently refusing to own their part in a conflict, that is not good. If you're always trying to show how, well, yeah, I did that, but that's because you did that first. If you hadn't talked to me like that, then I wouldn't have done what I did. If you're in a relationship where apologies are really rare, it's like once every 5 years or 10 years, or when repair is missing, or there's a lot of blame and defensiveness constantly in the dynamic, over time, there's this erosion of positive regard, and then they're going to start to see you through a lens that is not positive. By the time you're leaning in and fighting for the marriage and saying, I really want this to work, you're frustrated that they can't see all the good because now their filter has changed over time. And that's the thing to keep in mind, is that these things over time change the perceptual filter, and it is very hard to change it back again after you've reached the point of no return. So you have to be willing to take accountability. If you are wondering, am I getting there? Are we entering into dangerous territory? Do I feel that my spouse is shutting down or pulling away and they're having doubts about whether or not we should be together? That is your cue to take radical ownership of all the things that you can own and try to offer repair around the things that you have not yet repaired. Because that's the only way that their filter will start to think, okay, there can be healing and repair, and then we can turn the page and create something different. But without that first step, they're not going to have any hope that things could be different.
Exactly. And what you're really speaking to there is the pattern interrupt. And that's what we need. We need a new behavior, some new words, some new actions to interrupt the old pattern that is driving them towards hopelessness.
Now, also another huge sign that you might be entering into danger territory is if you can feel that they're no longer seeing you in a positive regard. And if you have been showing up in a way where they believe that you don't see them in a positive light. If you've been not holding them in positive regard for years and your negative messaging has outweighed your positive messaging, eventually then they will view you in a different light as well. And that's probably what you're going to be up against the most. Like the calls that we get, it's because the person that we're talking to is saying that their spouse no longer sees them in positive regard. But usually it's because that comes after them feeling like they were not held in positive regard or held in high regard, that they were missing appreciation and expressions of fondness and admiration for a long time. And so eventually that will work both ways. So make sure that if you notice that that's happening, you're like, wow, they really aren't seeing me through a positive light. Don't get mad about it. Look at what part did I play in that? And what can I do to change the filter? What can I do to start showing up with evidence to the contrary? The other thing too is resentment. This is huge. And I've talked about this before. Resentment is the biggest thing that we deal with. The reason why they don't want to give it another shot, the reason why they don't want to go to couples counseling with you, the reason why they need time and space and are thinking about leaving the marriage is because they have so much resentment. You don't feel like they respect you anymore. They don't know how they feel about you. They say, I love you and care about you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. They're not wanting to be affectionate. They're not wanting intimacy anymore. And you just feel like they have those dark glasses on, like we were just talking about. And that's a specific skill set of repair as well. Kind of getting back to what we talked about in the beginning with the emotional connection. If your spouse has been hurt and there hasn't been enough repair and acknowledgement, you have to melt the walls of resentment first. There's no way that you can bypass that.
No, yes, resentment does play a really big role, but it can be fixed. It can be healed through, and it begins with pattern interrupts. It begins with healing the root causes that are driving the default program, the defensive behavior, so that you can replace it with relationally healthy behavior like repair, like attunement, like giving feedback in a structured way, and really increasing the emotional intimacy and also using tools for healthy communication. All of that plays a role in healing resentments, but you want to get started on it sooner than later.
Even if you don't have the repair skills yet, I think explicitly expressing your desire to repair, acknowledging that there has been hurt that hasn't been repaired, and coming forward and saying, I want to be your ally in repairing the hurts that have accumulated, and I want to take ownership of my part, and I want to show up in new story ways, like a new foundation for our marriage, in such a way where not only will those things not be happening to the same degree anymore, but if they were to happen, we will have a culture of being able to actually talk about it and repair. You have to be explicit about your intention for things to be different. That will help them bring those walls down a little bit and be like, okay, let me see what you got. Let's see if we can do this. I'm open to the hope, right? But a lot of times we talk to people where they've already done it once. They've already come back. They've been separated once before, or they were in counseling before and it just never got better. It got better for a while and they fell back into old ways. So then we have even more that we have to work against. We have to override so many years. And so even if you don't have the skills yet, just make sure you draw a line in the sand and say, from this moment forward, it's a culture of repair, and own your part, because that can help them just be open to the possibility.
Exactly. And most people are not holding on to resentments out of spite on purpose to punish. A person brings something up repeatedly or is not able to fully let go because it hasn't been truly, deeply heard, validated, acknowledged. But when you can do that, you'd be surprised how quickly those things can fade.
Mm-hmm.
They can
It's
be
true.
healed.
Mountains of anger can melt, and there can be such gratitude and joy on the other side. This also speaks perfectly into the idea of the positive to negative ratio that I've talked about in many contexts before. As you guys all know, the biggest predictor, according to John Gottman's research, is the ratio of positive to negative. The sweet spot is at least 5-1 positive to negative. Anything less than that, and you're not really on solid footing. So if you are like, you know what, when it's good, it's really good, but when it's bad, it's really bad, and you're at about 50-50, that is actually not a good sign. So even though the good is really good and you can still access the love for each other, maybe you still do have a good filter of the other person. But if the ratio is not good and it's either 50-50 or less or even higher negative than that, then you're definitely in danger territory. And the negatives, we would include negatives as obviously this is subjective and it's defined by the spouses themselves on what they would consider a positive interaction or a negative interaction. But the negatives are generally considered criticism, which is attacking character instead of behavior, defensiveness, which is deflection of accountability instead of listening, stonewalling, contempt, pervasive lack of empathy, harsh startups, and emotional shutdowns, right? If you come in with like guns a-blazing, that's considered a harsh startup, and that is considered a negative interaction. And so over time, this will erode connection. So one of the biggest ways that you can restore a marriage is just to start to expand the positive, which I love this idea because it means that you don't have to heal all the negative. Most people start with that. Most people start with like, what are the problems? Let's just focus on the problems and eradicate the problems. Well, now we're analyzing and living in the world of the problem, and we're just magnifying that through our attention. Rather, you pull back and you go, where are we doing well? What do I know works? And expand the positive interactions. Now the negative becomes marginalized. It doesn't have the same power. From that place, we can go back and solve the problems. because
Yes.
we have a full tank. We can talk about it without things falling apart because we've got money in the bank. We feel connected. We feel repaired. We had a few laughs today. We're on the same side. But you got to expand the positive, right? So that's something you can
Yeah.
definitely do if you notice you're not in that ratio.
Yes, exactly. And it's so timely that you're saying this because the client call I had right before this live stream, our client was telling me that they've only been in for 2 weeks and it feels like longer because of not only all the work, but all the interactions and all the practice they've gotten and the positive outweighing the negative, and that really making such a huge difference that there is more back and forth in a playful way, in an emotionally attuned way, in a new story way that is not fully drowning out the old story, but it's making such an impact that it's really very noticeable. And that's the kind of thing that provides momentum to keep going.
Exactly. That's what you need. You need the momentum. The hardest part, it's literally like trying to save a marriage when it's already kind of on the brink. It's like climbing Mount Everest where you have to stop at base camp and let your body adjust and restore yourself a little bit or put a, oxygen mask on. You have to save your energy. And the final thing I want to mention that I think puts you in dangerous territory that you definitely do not want to ignore is when you are just waiting for change instead of creating it. There's this idea that like, well, when I'm getting a green light, I'm going to approach her. When it seems like she's over it and she's not mad at me anymore, then I will approach her. When it seems like things are calmer, then I'll bring up this conversation and see what we can do to have a repair chat or to discuss how we want to work on our marriage or to apologize or whatever you want to do to take ownership and to take accountability of like, what can I do to turn this around? How they got to that point is because they were waiting and they didn't even know how passive they were being. The complacency and that comfort zone is so powerful and seductive that you can just get caught in it. The day-to-day things that come up in your life, work, kids, things that require your attention day to day, it's so easy to back burner the rest of it. So like if you're leaning in and you have somebody who's leaning out, you don't want to just wait because time in and of itself doesn't do anything. That's why we recommend therapeutic separation. You can have a separation, but the stats on that are not good when you look at statistics of separation leading to divorce. But that's because there wasn't any therapeutic component. It was just time and space is supposed to just do it all for us, right? But that's not what does it. It's the work that you do that has to happen. But so often I hear people say to me, I wish I would have done more sooner. I think I was just waiting for the right time. I didn't realize we were at that point. I knew we had problems, but I just didn't think we were at that point. But if you ask yourself right now, if my spouse were to say, I'm done right now, would you be willing to do everything in your power to prioritize your relationship? And if the answer is yes, then you should do that even if your spouse is not already at the point of no return. Because even if they're not past the point of no return, it's so much harder to do it in crisis when they're ambivalent. It's a shame because we can still fix it, but it's just so much harder and it takes more time and it's more painful. And yeah, there's just more hurts along the way. So I guess if I could just say anything, it would be, please don't wait. Just don't wait. Don't wait for the right time. Don't wait until you finish raising your kids. Don't wait for your kitchen renovation to be done.
Right, exactly. That's such an excellent way to put it, is like, if you would do everything in your power, if your spouse were to say right now that they're done, if you would do everything in your power to fix it, to not break up your family, then just do it now before you get to that point, because it is so much harder to turn around at that point. We can still fix it, but sometimes we can't. And you don't want to take that chance.
So what do we do about it? I'll just go through the 6 things that you have to do to prevent getting to that point of no return. First, you want to take radical accountability. Own 100% of your part. There is no shame in that. It is a stand-up thing to do. Everybody has blind spots. There is no shame in having blind spots and recognizing them and then owning them. Doesn't mean everything is your fault. It just means that's where your power lies. You want to prioritize vulnerability over defensiveness because you cannot be connected if pride is getting in the way, right? So let go of your pride in order to be willing to connect. Be brave enough to be real even when it's scary. Learn how to do it even if it's hard, and don't accept your limitations and your fears. If it feels uncomfortable, oh well. I'll bet you there are things you can point to in your life that were really hard, that were uncomfortable, that you had to spend a lot of time and effort to do, and you did it, right? So that's the attitude you want to have about your relationship. So you have to find the information that you need and get the support to change your default modes and learn the skills you need to learn, because anything else is a choice to stay stuck. Then you also want to commit to change before the crisis comes. We talked about that before. So don't wait for it to feel convenient. We talked about that already. Please choose discomfort over disaster. Increase your appreciation, increase that ratio, positive to negative, to at least 5-1 or higher. If you criticized your spouse today, find 5 ways to express fondness and admiration to offset that criticism or that complaint. Really think about that. I think you can change the whole energy or the atmosphere in your relationship. You can also check out, I did a video on YouTube that's called 99.99% of marriages won't last without this. And that's where I go into the 5-1 ratio a little bit more in detail. The 5th thing is make sure you get some kind of help, whether that's a coaching relationship, whether that's therapy, whether that's support groups, men's groups. Anytime we're trying to change our default psychology, the programs that keep us on autopilot, the programs that brought us here, they're still stronger than anything else. The only way that your conscious intention to change from the inside out and to save your marriage, the only way that that's going to be stronger than your default mode is if you condition it. So you actually have to not just decide you're going to make the changes, but actually condition those changes. Find somebody that will be in the trenches with you, that'll prevent you from backsliding and can spot coach you along the way. Because a lot can go wrong if you're doing the traditional method where it's like only 50 minutes for an hour and then 2 weeks later you have another session. Think how many bad things can happen in the 2 weeks or even 1 week in between those sessions. So make sure you have a lot of support in between. And then finally, you're going to want to do the inner work. Most of what destroys relationships didn't start in the relationship. Most of it was something you brought to the relationship that probably served you at one time. That was a coping skill that was a good thing for you, but no longer is serving you. So you can't grow out of the patterns that you refuse to look at, right? So you have to shine the light on what are those patterns so that I can grow past them and not let them shoot me in the foot anymore. And if there's one thing I just want you to walk away with, it is hope, right? It is hope that obviously love is the most important thing. And people that have everything they could ever want will tell you it means nothing without that loving relationship. So make that the priority, but also have hope that it is possible. You really can do so much when you double down and you're willing to go into the discomfort of that work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another really relevant point here that you had jotted down is that, it's never going to feel convenient. It's never going to feel convenient to start this work, but you've got to do it anyway, because doing this now is still a hell of a lot easier than attempting to try when your spouse has really reached that place of hopelessness.
Right. There's a really great quote, and I don't know where this came from, but it's the biggest tragedy in relationships is not a lack of love. It's a mistimed readiness. That's a tragedy. Regret always comes too late. So we're trying to prevent that.
Yes.
If anybody wants to book a call, if anybody is interested in getting support around this from us to explore, feel free to book a call. It's a free call, no obligation. But if you want to explore, it's important to find the right fit, somebody that you really feel like their modalities line up for what you want. Shop around, get the right help for you. And if you want to explore us, you can book that call. We'll put the link below. But with that said, I wanted to open it up for some questions.